Okay, there's 10 people in the waiting room.
Nope, they're coming in.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. We're going to give people one more minute to come in and then we'll get started. Okay, I see that it is 11:01, and so we're going to get started with our webinar, and I thank you all for being here. My name is Jean Walters, formerly Hidalgo. I'm the Youth Program Manager with IHCDA. We are currently implementing a federal grant for youth and young adult housing security called the Youth Homelessness Systems Improvement Grant. We believe the current YESI projects situate us for a very strong application for the newly live YHDP application. We hope you will be inspired by this presentation to consider a project application for these YHDP funds. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on our IHCDA website. You may put questions in the chat as they arise. We will be monitoring the chat for your questions and will address them at various intervals. Also, please note that this webinar reflects our professional opinions as the primary applicant. Always default to the YHDP NOFO for final instructions and guidance. So we're going to start off with some definitions. Well, here's our agenda. Just give you a second to take a look at that. And then we can go to our review of our definitions. And most of you are probably familiar with these definitions. So the continuum of care, and we're gonna go into more descriptions about what the continuum of care means. And YHDP is obviously the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, which this webinar is reflecting upon. The NOFO is a Notice of Funding Opportunity. Transitional housing and supportive services only are the key components of eligible projects for this funding. And then we are hosting, we're managing an internal competition. So that's where people can apply for, they can promote a project or submit a project for our consideration. And then we are serving as the collaborative applicant. And we are the designated collaborative applicant for the Indiana Balance of State. If there's any acronyms today that we use that you're not familiar with, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. And Kristen, with no further ado, I'm going to turn this webinar over to Kristen Garvey, who's the Executive Director of Community Services and Programs.
Well, I'm Senior Director, Executive Director.
I always want to make you an executive.
I know.
You're an
That's
executive
okay.
in my mind. Okay.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
First of all, I want to start off with definition of homelessness. There are different definitions of homelessness, and one of the things, this is HUD funding, and so we abide by the HUD definition of funding. So there are 4 categories of homelessness. First one is that they are literally homeless. That's category 1. Category 2 is someone who is at imminent risk of homelessness. Category 3 is runaway or homeless youth, unaccompanied youth, and it really is encompassed under other federal definitions of homelessness. And then finally, category 4 is fleeing domestic violence. Currently, the funding that we receive through the COC program, it does not cover Category 3. It also does not cover Category 2. However, we have another funding source called Emergency Solutions Grants, which does cover that Category 2. Because of that, one of the reasons that we are interested in applying for this YHDP grant is because that we would then be able to serve Category 3 homelessness in the state of Indiana. Next slide. I wanted to give you a little history lesson on the COC funding. Just because those of you who have joined us today may not be familiar with the COC as a concept or anything like that, and just to give you a grounding of what this funding is. And the COC funding is the largest source of federal grant funding for homeless services and housing in the United States, and it is administered by the Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. It has its origins in 1994. Prior to that, local organizations applied individually for fragmented HUD homeless grants. So to fix that, in 1994, HUD created or introduced the COC planning process for the same geographic areas to collaborate and assess community needs and submit a single coordinated funding application. Prior to that, agencies were just applying as a single entity. In 2009, an act called the Hearth Act was passed. That is the Homeless Emergency Assistance and Rapid Transition to Housing, or HARTH. This law officially codified the COC process into federal statute. So in 2009, it was established that those applicants would follow this process called the continuum of care. And then that allowed COCs to coordinate between larger, broader stakeholders. And it also created a framework for a competitive funding process. So next slide. When you hear COC, it's going to mean several different things. It's going to mean a philosophy, which is a system to provide comprehensive and collaborative resources and services to ensure vulnerable people receive the assistance they need to obtain housing stability. It is a program. Again, just explained what that program is on the previous slide. It is also a network. There is a board of directors that is established by each COC to act on the COC's behalf. And it is required to operate the COC and develop the plan for the COC and operate different infrastructure processes, such as the HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System database, as well as the Coordinated Entry, or CE system. And then it is a funding source. The key funding source for this was part of the McKinney-Vento Act, and then also through the Hearth Act. Next slide. So with regards to COC funding, every once in a while, HUD will provide an opportunity to fund or to submit applications for different types of funding. Currently, that I know of, we have DV bonus funding, which is through the DV or the COC process. This YHDP funding. And then in 2023, they sent out a notice for different funding. One is called the rural funding, and the other one was unsheltered. And the unsheltered funding was specifically for urban settings. So for us, for the balance of state, we currently receive DV bonus funding and rural funding. And we're hoping that we will get this YHDP funding. So as you think about the balance of state structure, like I said earlier, there is a board of directors. There are 17 members, 17 HUD designated groups, 8 members at large, and 2 regional representatives. There are standing committees of the board. There is the executive, community engagement, funding and resources committee, etc. These committees are doing the work of the COC. And then occasionally they will also have a task force. We've done an assessment of our assessment evaluation process. We initially had a task force for governance and nominating, and as of last year, that actually has become a standing committee. And then currently, we have a landlord engagement process or task force that is kind of wrapping up, and hopefully we'll be submitting documentation and best practices and materials for landlord engagement. And then finally, there are regional planning councils around the state. These are made up of key stakeholders. And as you think about it, all of you, if whether you receive this funding or not receive this funding, you can participate on the regional level in these planning councils. And we encourage that because that is where the real work is happening to end or prevent homelessness in the various regions. Next slide. And this is a map of our regional planning councils. There are 16 regions around the state. There are 2 regions, Region 1A and 2A, which are at the top of the map. Lake County and St. Joseph County are single county regions. And then the rest of the balance of state regional planning councils are made up of multiple counties within the region. So you can see how these are made up. Indianapolis and Marion County are led by their own COC. So we, as the balance of state, cover the 91 of the 92 counties, whereas Indianapolis is run by the CHIP, which is a coalition. Oh, I always forget their acronym. Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention. So the city of Indianapolis is actually the collaborative applicant for this city, but CHIP provides all of the other services that are needed to run the COC in Indianapolis. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean.
It's me again. So I wanted to just tell you all what is the YHDP NOFO, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. It's funded through congressional appropriations through HUD, and it is meant to support housing and service projects for youth and young adults, which is classified as age 14 to 24 by HUD definition. The YHDP funds provide direct housing and services for youth experiencing homelessness, and there have been 8 rounds of YHDP funding beginning in 2016. Various state COCs have received this funding, and now it is our turn. I say boldly, it is our turn. The YHDP NOFO, which dropped on June 10th, is funding allocated from the fiscal years 2024 and 2025. There were no applications during the 2024-2025 grant cycle, and so that funding is now available. Over the years, based on the expertise from those 8 rounds of grant awardees and the changes in our current federal administration, the focus of YHDP priorities has shifted. And we'll take a look at that in the next slide, the comparison from the most recent award in 2023 to this year's award. But just wanted to point out that in reading the grant several times, one thing that I've noticed is that there's a high priority of facilitating self-sufficiency for youth and young adults who have housing insecurity and homelessness. Okay, so here is the description and the shift that you can see in the priorities of eligibility since the last YHDP application in 2023. There is a singular focus on the path to youth and young adult self-sufficiency. It seems like all roads lead to that they're looking for projects that lead to self-sufficiency. Applicants must explicitly agree not to operate drug injection or safe consumption sites. The priorities are, it prioritizes crisis intervention for youth experiencing substance abuse disorder, severe mental illness, human trafficking, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. And that priority was taken from the National Runaway Youth 2025 project. So this grant application appears to rely on the results of that report. There is no acknowledgement of previously recognized subpopulations such as BIPOC and LGBTQ plus youth. There's a priority of services leading to housing security such as education, employment, behavior health support, social connections, and long-term independence. And there's an emphasis on transitional housing over permanent supportive housing. There are requirements to participate in services such as case management and job training. Not optional, but required. And then here you can see a more detailed approach to the project priorities articulated. This is directly from the notice of funding. So there's a focus on transitional housing, which includes crisis residential housing and shared housing, and supportive services only. And those services are such as dedicated to coordinated entry, host homes and kinship care, housing search and placement services, case management, supportive services connected with foster youth to independent vouchers or street outreach. There is also supportive services associated with coordinated entry, HMIS, and the planning grant money that 5% of the allocation can be used for planning, which is administrative, which like pays the salaries of IHCDA staff who are implementing these projects and supporting the implementation. Okay, so we thought it would be helpful to go over some details of what exactly is transitional housing. And so we just pulled this from the HUD website. It is temporary. It can go for a maximum of 24 months, although the supportive services for transitional housing can go for another 12 months after the youth or young adult has exited transitional housing. Those supportive services can still be paid for, funded for another 12 months. It is for interim stability and to equip residents with the skills to transition to permanent housing, thus self-sufficiency. I highlighted the word self-sufficiency again. It's trying to give youth and young adults the skill sets they need to live independently, and they see this application articulates the need for case management, life skills training, mental health or substance abuse counseling, and employment training. And in order, when they're in transitional housing, they must have an active lease or sublease or a formal occupancy agreement in place during their stay. And there is also support for interventions for specific populations that have needs, such as homeless youth overall, but those who are suffering from domestic violence, they're survived or they're fleeing, and individuals who have active addictions. So those are all under the transitional housing category. The supportive services only, this is a detailed list of some of those supportive services, but they're standalone services without directly providing housing or housing assistance. HUD is saying that those services can lead to housing security. They're meant to help participants obtain and maintain housing. And some of the services can be outreach, case management, life skills training, employment and education assistance, host homes and kinship care, street outreach, and other and foster youth to independence vouchers. And now I believe I am going to turn this webinar over to Araceli Martinez.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Araceli Martinez. I'm the youth program analyst working directly with Jean and helping out with this YHDP grant. Some of the things that Jean just talked about were transitional housing and supportive services only. And she mentioned a lot of terms, so we wanted to make sure that we defined what those terms were. So crisis residential transitional housing is one of those allowed transitional housing projects for the YHDP grant. That is defined as short-term, low-barrier congregate living settings that provide access to these supportive services, family engagement and unification, case management, emergency triage, and other supportive services. When we talk about shared housing, that's defined as rental assistance provided for youth to reside with family or another unrelated person. When we talk about host home and kinship care, which is under supportive services only projects, that is defined as youth resides with an individual or a family related to the youth or not and can cover recruitment costs. So the grant can cover recruitment costs of finding those host homes for youth. When we say supportive services only, that is defined as a service that meets emergency needs, housing search and placement services, case management, the FYI vouchers or street outreach. And when we talk about coordinated entry, that is defined as the standard process people to access and be accessed for and referred to housing services in their communities. So it's kind of the system in which if somebody presents themselves at a location looking for housing services, they would have to go through the coordinated entry process to then be referred to the housing that they need. So our next slide is we wanted to go a little bit further into what the competitive application process is, what your guys' role will be, and then also what our role is within this process. So beginning off, we just wanted to note that, as Jean had mentioned, the funds available for this year are from fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. And the available funds for this year will be $193 million. And that encompasses the whole youth homelessness notification of funding opportunity. 144 million of those dollars are specifically for the YHDP, which is the grant that we're applying for currently. The other amount is for the YESI grant, which is the Youth Homelessness Systems Improvement, which is the grant that IHCDA currently has. And as it says kind of in the title, that the purpose of the YESI grant is to kind of look at your system, look at the state of Indiana for us, and see how we can improve, what barriers and challenges we're facing, and how we can move forward. But the 144 million is kind of the bucket of money that we're looking at currently. Each award from HUD will be 500,000 minimum amount and a 15 million maximum amount. So let's move forward into thinking about the process of how this is going to look. So starting at the left, we have individual projects. So that's going to be you guys. Those are the project applications that are going to be serving the local needs. So for example, if you're applying for a project for your county, whether you're in Lake County or somewhere down south, each county really needs to have a tailored approach. You guys know what your county needs or what your project needs. So this is an opportunity for you guys to really design a project that's going to meet the needs of your community, specifically for youth who are experiencing homelessness. And as mentioned, that can look very different if you're applying in a county in northern Indiana versus southern Indiana. So this is the opportunity for you guys to design that project as you guys feel will best fit the needs of your community. That project will then be submitted to us through our JOT form application, which we'll go into a little bit more in the following slides. But you will submit that project application and we will receive that project application. So any organization within the balance of state continuum of care, which Kristen mentioned was the 91 out of the 92 counties in Indiana, can apply under us as a collaborative applicant. They can apply and submit an individual project, and we will then take all of those projects and prioritize them. So how do we prioritize them? We will have a ranking system according to the balance of state continuum of care priorities. However, although it is kind of a competition amongst all of the submissions that we do have, we are trying to fund/fit as many projects as possible so that it can have the greatest impact for the state of Indiana. So once we've prioritized all of the projects that were submitted to us, we then create the collaborative application. So the collaborative application is really the process in which we're putting everything together. So we're collating all the projects that we've received. We're completing all of the narrative questions that they're asking us, and we're submitting all the required documents and forms. And we're creating this nice, very neat package to then submit to HUD. So while you guys are submitting individual projects to us, we are then taking all of those projects, creating it into one really nice application and submitting it all to HUD through a system that's called eSnaps, which we have access to. So that's kind of how that process looks. So quick recap, you submit your individual project. We then prioritize those projects and submit it all to HUD as a collaborative application. So let's move forward. Already mentioned a little bit, but kind of what is IHCDA's role in this whole process? So we are what's considered the collaborative applicant. So as mentioned, the collaborative applicant is a designated area or a designated entity that's the one in charge of creating a consolidated application to HUD. Along with that, there's other responsibilities and benefits that come with being the collaborative applicant. For example, only collaborative applicants can receive up to 5% of the funding to be able to cover those administrative costs. If you're not the collaborative applicant and are applying for the grant, you wouldn't get these benefits. We are then also able to designate other entities such as a consultant to help apply and receive grants and also to perform other administrative duties. And then we're responsible for ensuring that the community participates in HMIS, which is the Homelessness Management Information System. This is a data system in which all information is collected from individuals who are touching different points of either organizations and looking for housing services, so that other entities throughout the state of Indiana are able to then also access that information. So along with us being the collaborative applicant, we are also the recipient of funds. So kind of as you all will be receiving funds once we get this grant, we also receive funds. So specifically, we receive funds for HMIS and coordinated entry. And then along with that, we would get the planning grant. So we are receiving funds and then having to also take part in making sure we carry those projects. And then those projects that are funded that you guys submit, you guys would be sub-grantee. So then we would be providing funds in that manner. Benefits of us applying as a collaborative applicant is that IHCDA staff, we would then be able to assist all of the organizations that are funded. And we also assist the Indiana Balance of State COC board. We would be able to provide technical assistance, monitoring, and grant management to make sure that grants are being utilized correctly, or answering any and all questions that arise as the 24 months occur of the grant. All right, so quickly into how the project application process looks. This is a high-level overview just to give you guys an idea of how this is going to work. So beginning off with step number 1, it's very essential that you meet eligibility requirements before you even start looking at crafting your project application. So 2 essential things that you will need are securing your UEI, which is a unique entity identifier, and that just signifies that you're registered to do business with the U.S. federal government. Along with that, you're going to need an active Indiana Secretary of State registration. So it means kind of the same thing, but it means that you're registered to do business within the state of Indiana. There will be links that we can put in the chat as far as where you can find your UEI, or you can find your active Indiana Secretary of State registration, and those will be mandatory to submit along with your application. So once you're sure that you have that and that you're eligible, you can then start crafting your project application responses. We have created, so let me backtrack a little. I had mentioned that our project application is going to be completed through JotForm. So JotForm is a online platform. We have all of our questions on there. However, it does not allow you to jump from page to page. So you have to complete everything on one page before you can move forward. And because that can sometimes, you might be wanting to plan ahead before you just jump into the application, we instead created an application guide. So the application guide is a separate document which you will be able to find on our website, or we might drop that link in the chat whenever we have time. But the application guide has every single question that's found on the jot form, but it's on a PDF. And then on that same PDF will be how many points that question is worth. So how we're scoring that question along with whether it's threshold. So for it to be a threshold requirement, you need to meet, or else we won't be able to consider your project for prioritization. So that application, you can use it however you like. For example, if you have a team who's working together to put this application together, you can create a shared document and start answering all of those questions on that shared document so that when you open the jot form, you're able to just copy and paste and answer those questions rather quickly. On that jot form as well, once it's submitted, you'll receive an email, and in that email, if you look back at your application and you notice that you missed something, whether it was adding specific information or you kind of want to reword one of your answers, you're actually able to go and you'll find a link where you're able to edit that. So instead of creating a completely new application to submit, you can just go ahead and edit your application that you've already submitted, and you will have up until the deadline to edit if you'd like. Along with that, if you're wanting to submit, let's say, 2 projects, let's say you want to submit a project for transitional housing and then a separate project for, moved ahead. And then a separate project for supportive services only, make sure you create 2 different applications. So in that case, you would start your application for transitional housing, complete it all the way through, submit it, and then you would start another application for your supportive services only project, complete it, and submit it as a separate project. Step number 3 was to attend the webinar. So that's where we are right now. You will also have access to review the recording along with the slides on our website after this. So make sure that if you need to look through some things or you want to hear some of the information that we were sharing today again, that will be available on our website, specifically in the youth and young adult homelessness page. The step number 4 is when our application is due. So our application is due on July 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. That is a hard deadline, so we cannot accept any applications after that. So make sure that you give yourself enough time to gather all the things that you need, answer all the questions, and then submit it in a timely manner. Step 5 is going to be the selection process. So that is now moving away from responsibility from you onto IHCDA as a collaborative applicant. So we will take all of those applications that we receive, and each of them will be scored by non-biased youth and young adults with lived experience, the Balance of State Continuum of Care board members, and also IHCDA staff that are non-conflicting. So they will go through the process of scoring each application so that then we are able to prioritize those. Each project applicant will hear back from IHCDA by August 10th, and on August 10th is actually when IHCDA has to submit that collaborative application in eSnaps so that it can be submitted to HUD. HUD will then review all of the applications that they receive nationwide, and awards will be announced, or at least are projected to be announced on September 15th of 2026. Projected start date of awardees is then October 1st of 2026. And once that grant is received, IHCDA, it keeps on moving forward, my apologies. IHCDA will then provide technical assistance to support each project that was awarded, and the implementation of that will begin. And of course, we would have technical assistance and a lot more guidance after that. But let's move forward into this slide. I just wanted to give you guys, instead of walking through the project application guide fully, because it's rather lengthy, we just wanted to provide some snippets of how it looks. So on the left side here, this is actually how the jot form is going to look. Right here, we're specifically asking questions. You're seeing question examples from the required questions that we have for transitional housing and supportive services, but you will see questions related to your organization, so just general information, what's the name, address, who can sign for the organization, etc. You then will have questions related to project information, so what type of project are you doing? Are you meeting the threshold requirements, etc. And then we have specific project questions. So these are the ones that have no sides. These are questions specifically to whether if you're applying for a transitional housing project or a supportive services only project. There's different qualifications that you need to meet depending on which project you're applying for. We then also have questions about the financial capacity of your organization, partnership and collaboration that you're planning to have within your project. There's a couple narrative questions, which are the lengthier questions. There's HUD priorities that the NOFO mentions, and we're just making sure that those are noted on our application as well, so that you're aware of those. And then there is a couple bonus questions depending on if you're serving a rural area, if you're serving an opportunity zone. Those are the two areas for bonus points, since HUD is prioritizing those as well, / giving bonus points for those. So just looking at the slide here, and the questions that I have presented, on the left, you'll notice the job form application, and these questions are required for both transitional housing and supportive services. So it's just asking questions such as, does your project incorporate positive youth development and trauma-informed care? That is a requirement by HUD this year. Which of the following outcomes is your project going to demonstrate? And then please describe how it's going to demonstrate that. And then some different threshold items for transitional housing versus supportive services only. But that you will be able to see on our project application guide, which is on our webpage, and then the job form is also, the link is also on our webpage. So just to give you guys a super high overview of the timeline, on June 10th was when HUD released the YHDP NOFO. On the 30th is when we released our internal application, our request for projects. So that has been open as of last week. In July, we are hosting our project webinar, which is today. We will then have office hours on the 15th. So that will be just a time where you can hop onto a call, and we will answer any and all questions that you have. On the 20th is the project deadline for you guys. So if you are wanting to submit a project application, July 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern is the deadline. On the 21st is when we will begin scoring and prioritizing all of our projects. August 10th is when we have our submission to HUD deadline, and we will have to submit that whole project packet all together. And then, as stated earlier, September 15th is the anticipated award date from HUD, and then on October 1st is the estimated performance period start date from HUD. And moving on to questions. I know I've seen a couple coming through the chat, but I will let Jean take over, and we can start answering some of those.
Yeah, I've been trying. Hi, everybody. Great job, Araceli. That was beautiful. I have been trying to respond to the questions. I actually incorrectly responded to a question about food, and I apologize. And Kristen, thank you for sharing the eligible costs. My experience with HUD is that food has never been covered, so I was surprised and grateful to find out that that is one of the eligible costs. And you want to speak about that, Kristen?
Yeah, so the link that I included in the chat is a link to an at-a-glance document that HUD has created. It is food, but very specifically in specific situations. So, for example, I think what Jean was referring to, if we're holding a conference, we cannot pay for the food. However, for supportive services, if you are serving individuals who have been shown to need the assistance, yes, food is allowed, and there would be regulations that you would have to follow.
Thank you for that clarity, Kristen. So some of the questions, the slides will be shared later, and they will be on our website by the end of today, along with this recorded webinar. There was also question about the minimum and maximum age requirements for youth, and HUD defines the minimal age from 14 to 18 to be youth and 19 to 24 to be young adults. And this is funding for youth and young adults, so age 14 to 24. Let's see, if awarded, when do funds have to be spent down by? I'm gonna attempt to answer that, Kristen, but I'm sure you'll have a more specific answer, but it is a 24-month grant with the 6-month potential extension as needed. So I'm gonna assume that needs to be spent down in 24 months. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think the other half of that question was regarding building, housing to be built and placed in services by. I'm assuming that you're talking about actually building a structure. I am going to share the COC NOFO, the scoring and ranking policies, because we will be following those as well through the YHDP program. These are set by the COC board. And I believe that acquisitions and construction are not required, but I'm going to, or not allowable for our COC. But I'm sharing the link right now.
Letty, you asked a question about a very specific question related to your center, and we do have office hours that we will send out invitations for Wednesday, the 15th of July at 2 o'clock EST. That might be the time to ask your specific question, or if you feel comfortable, you can bring that up right now and we can take you off of mute. I believe that we are able to do that. Let me see. Yeah, so I think I just allowed you to unmute yourself if you want to ask your question. You can do that. There is also, to answer Abby Johnson's question, there is a required match, 25%, but that is not only cash but in kind. And I'm going to rely on Kristen to be specifically what does the in kind include?
Jean, can I go ahead and discuss my question?
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, so we are right now a shelter for kids, and we're trying to get licensed by DCS. So I was thinking we could apply for these supportive services only, but once we have a license from DCS, could we then move into the transitional housing project? Or are we not allowed to move between projects?
I can answer that question. So no, you would not be able to move between the projects. Unless, and I'm going to put a caveat on this, that we are operating with COC guidance, but typically you would not be able to do that unless you did a major budget modification. Unfortunately, to add a component that big to this, because they're two separate projects, it would be very difficult to do a budget modification.
Okay, thank you.
And then the second part of the question about 25% required match, Kristen, would you describe what that means in addition to financial? It can mean in kind.
Yeah, and I speaking to that, and I'm looking at the NOFO because you did add that information. So we are finding that there are some contradictions in this NOFO, in the COC NOFO, etc. Our understanding is that by submitting an application through the collaborative applicant or anyone who is associated with the COC, you would have to match. And then with regards to match, again, it can be a cash a cash or in kind. If it is an in kind contribution, you would have to have MOUs with whoever is providing that in kind contribution. But as long as the activity is eligible for the funding source, then that would be allowable as a match.
Okay, Kristen, this question came up about match also, and this is from Abby Johnson. And Abby, I want to tell you that at first glance, I had the same response you did. I understood it to mean that if you're not receiving COC funding right now, then you wouldn't have to contribute to a match. But as Kristen explained to me, as part of the collaborative application, your project, you would be receiving COC funding. And so therefore, you do have to provide a 25% match. Do I have that correct, Kristen?
Mhm.
She was quoting, Abby was quoting the
Yeah.
NOFO. Yeah.
I see that.
Did that answer your question, Abby?
So, I'm going to move on to another question from Abby.
Okay, and I'm allowing Abby, I'm allowing you to speak. I mean, I opened up your mic. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so because I saw that there was like two exemptions. One was like not having COC funding, which wouldn't be us either. But then the one was said that recipients will not be required to meet the 25% match if they're able to identify multiple non-YHDP resources in the community that assist homeless youth and can provide a narrative description of how they'll assist. So I didn't know if there was anything under that, or is that just kind of talking about like in-kind donations and having MOUs in place, or is that separate?
I don't know. I think a lot of those types of questions are going to be answered when we can actually see what the application looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, the way the YHDP worked is that we were given 6 months to put everything in place and get a lot of these questions answered prior to executing our projects. HUD is not doing it that way this time. And because we haven't had this funding before, there may be some nuances that we're not finding or we're not thinking about right now.
Okay. And do you know if CSBG can be used as match for this?
Which one, CSBG?
Mm-hmm.
We can check on that. I don't know. I'm assuming that if it's something that a COC grant would allow, then this would allow as well. But again, it is new funding.
Okay.
Okay, Kristen, we have a question. If we may partner with local nonprofits on a project, then should I reach out to them to coordinate a project submission prior to July 20th? Or would it be better for each nonprofit to submit their own application? I have thoughts about that, but I want to give you the opportunity first to respond.
Well, let me hear your thoughts.
My thoughts are that yes, please. It would be great if you had a coordinated project submission.
Yeah, I think I would agree that if you had a coordinated, you would probably want one organization to submit the application as sort of the lead organizations. But if you've already identified partners, that is all the better.
I even think that would be advantageous to have that type of application. Because at least in previous years, YHDP really focused on community collaboration. There used to be a 6-month period for forming community collaboration. So I do believe that is of value. And is it Iman? I did unmute you, so if you wanted to, Iman, if you wanted to add anything verbally, please do. Let us know if we answered your question.
No, I really appreciate that answer. That helps me out. I am attending this on behalf of my director. So that's just something I was thinking about, like, all right, what are some things we might be working on? And I know we try to collaborate with other nonprofits here in Elkhart County. So it just made me think of, like, with such a tight deadline,
Mm-hmm.
reach out to them, or, do we submit individually? So I
Yeah,
appreciate that guidance.
I think it would be very valuable to do a collaboration. Okay, we have another question from Abby. This is good. I'm so glad you guys are asking questions. Will this be an annual application or every 2 years? This is not going to be, to our knowledge, and never mind. I'm not going to speak. Kristen, go ahead. I was about to answer and then I'm realizing maybe I don't know.
So this current application is for 2 years. And so that is part of the YHDP. Once at the end of that 2-year process, how I understand it is it will be incorporated into our normal COC application. So it would then become an annual application every year.
And the reason I hesitated is because there was not an application in 2024, 2025. Up until from 2016 to 2023, there was an annual application, but then there was a pause. So
Yeah, so just to clarify, this application that we're doing is for new funding. Once it becomes renewal, again, it gets incorporated into the COC overall running demand that we have, or the grants inventory worksheet. So it would become part of the renewal process under the COC.
okay, we have a clarification question from Alana. So just to clarify, if we wanted to build new housing for this purpose, this funding would not support that.
Correct. At this point, especially because of the timing, if you have not broken ground or even started it, the timing of the funding may not necessarily work. And that might be a conversation that we want to have offline, so that we can hear what you're doing. I will, if you're close to having everything in order, there is a third COC funding that is available. However, at this point, we're not going to be going after it. It's called COC Builds. And that is actually, we're looking towards our real estate division for them to take the lead on that if they would want to. So we may just need to put you in touch with them and see if it would be advantageous to apply for that funding.
And if you put we'll put, Kristen, should they contact you to be connected to COC Builds? I'm gonna put Kristen's email address in the chat then. And then also we have a great question from Amy Phillips. Clarify the amount each individual project can apply for. And that question, we've asked that question and we were told to encourage you just to apply for what you need without a limit. Is that accurate, Kristen, from what Sam told us?
Probably thinking about, and this is not anywhere, and we have not necessarily made this, but making sure that that we have a minimum of projects, which could be around like $50,000, but the maximum depends on how many units, how much supportive services you want. We want to ask for as much funding as we can and see how much we can get.
And Amy, based on all the work you've already done, go for sky's the limit, okay? No, I can't promise you anything, but you've been so great in your involvement. And I'm looking for you so I think I can unmute you. There you go. Okay. Do you have any other further clarifications for that, Amy? You should be able to speak. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's very open and wide. Usually there's parameters, so I guess we'll see what we can come up with and go from there. When we are looking at, so if I am looking at collaborating with a few other agencies, do we necessarily need to define like each agency potentially might want this much money to participate? Or, I mean, I've printed the grant, but I haven't gone through and looked at it yet.
There's actually budget, they do require a budget with the application.
Okay.
So that may or may not, I mean, it just depends to me, it depends on how you would apply. Maybe there's going to be a category for, let's just say food, because I was wrong about that answer, or just the different categories of supportive services. You could budget for those and not do individual agencies needing that. I mean, it just, yeah, I would take a look at the budget portion of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Have we responded to every question? I'm gonna scroll back through. And I just want to give clarity. I know that it can be confusing, but HUD, if HUD awards our BOC COC with this funding, the base is automatically 500,000. Like you just get that because you got the award. And then they have their own complicated, in my mind, formula that they look at the poverty rate in our state. And then they do like a calculation to determine how much they will award us. At least that's how they've done it previously.
Yeah, especially for the transitional housing project, you will need to build your budget for the transitional housing on FMR, or fair market rate, for your area, and that does differ depending on where you are in the state. There is a website where you can get that information, and let me see if I can pull it up.
I'm going to answer Murphy Mentoring Group while Kristen's looking that up. Marion County has its own reporting structure to HUD. They have their own COC, and I believe they are applying for, at least to my knowledge, I'm going to say everything to my knowledge, they are applying for YHDP also. But they are a separate entity. They have their own structure, their own COC.
Yeah, so to piggyback on that, if you serve the donut counties around Marion County, as well as Marion County, you can apply for both. So you could get money for Marion County through the Indy COC, as well as the donut counties would come from our this funding through the balance of state.
I don't know if Kristen or Araceli can be quicker than I am, but I did want to mention that there is a lot of flexibility in the type of spending that can be done for this YHDP application. Do you know what I'm talking about, Kristen? There was a list of things like 6 months previous rent and destruction to property and transportation. And there was just things, allowable expenses that were not previously allowable. And I just asked Araceli if she would help me find that reference, and we could put that in the chat when she pulls that up.
Yeah,
But
there are regulations for the COC funding that this funding would have to follow, but because of the way the NOFO is written, if there are any flexibilities that are written into the NOFO, then yes, you would be able to do that. For example, that 6 months arrears is not necessarily allowable under the COC funding, but it would be for this funding.
And please notice that Araceli just put in the team meeting, the team office for the office hours that we will be offering. So please take the look at that link, copy and paste it, put it in your calendar so that we can, as you start the application, we're assuming that some questions will come up for you, and we would be happy to spend some time addressing those questions. And thank you so much, Araceli, for also pulling up the program flexibility. I think those are worthy of note. If I was applying for a project, I would want to know that those options are available. Okay, and Letty, I'm sorry, you asked this question before and we didn't respond to. Can other grant funds count as a cash match or in-kind donation? I think Kristen did address that. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, I'll respond. Again, because this is a new funding, we'll be on a learning curve just like you. However, yes, there are other grant funds that can count as match as long as it is an eligible expense. So there has to be that eligibility, and it also cannot be duplicative. So a duplicate would be that you're counting it on both sides, and that may not necessarily be allowed. So yes, with a caveat.
Araceli, would you mind putting the slide, the second to last slide up, just so people can see it one more time, the time frame? I thought that might be helpful. And I did put in the chat the link to our webpage where the recording and the slides will be located by, hopefully by the end of the day. And there's also on our webpage, there is the actual application, and then Araceli created a beautiful guide to the application that walks you through step by step this question, and she gives you guidance on how to answer it. Not what your answer should be, but the response criteria. I don't even know how to put it, but it's guidance. It's guidance. And we also have a fact sheet, a YHDP fact sheet on the webpage too. And she's just added links to all the things that we have mentioned in this webinar. So you should not have a problem finding the information. She has links to the supportive services only budget form, transitional housing budget form, the list of funding communities. And by the way, we have done some conversations with previous YHDP recipients to learn more about how they prioritized and how they worked through the YHDP. But once again, I mentioned there's been some shifts. She has put the application, the guide, the fact sheet. There's a bonus points for rural designation, and if your project occurs in an opportunity zone, and so the links to those, so you can know if you're in an opportunity zone, shows the state map. That's all there. She even put the link to the sam.gov and the Indiana Secretary of State registration. So everything in one place. Look in the fact sheet. That will help you. Okay,
And
I'm just going to check to see if we have any other questions.
there's one question about the apply button is grayed out.
That should not be.
Do you guys want me to share the screen of our youth and young adult homelessness page, if that's helpful?
That would be great. That's a great idea, Araceli.
Let me do that real quick.
Will these links be included in the slides when it goes up? Or
Yes,
added?
Yes, we could make sure that they are.
Okay, I'm like trying to open them all and save them and print them, but it's
Yes.
Okay. I think, do you guys see the webpage of our website?
yes, I
Okay.
can see it.
All right, so let me just backtrack. So when you first go onto our IHTA webpage, there's a couple different buttons. So you want to make sure you're clicking to not get confused between internal competition and youth and young adult. So the internal competition is separate for COC. If you're wanting to apply for YHDP, make sure you go to youth and young adult. And then once that loads, you will find the project application link right here. So I'll click on it just so that you can see. It should be able to take you straight to the job form link. It has a little intro, and then once you start clicking next is when you have all of the questions to start applying for your project. But everything should be within this page, as we had mentioned. The project application itself, the application guide, which gives you guidance on what questions will be on the project application so you can plan ahead. And then the FAQ is going to have all of the links that we've added in the chat. And it will also have some clarification on some questions that we think are important to clarify.
So Letty, I don't know why you're getting a grayed out message on the website because Araceli was just able to open it, so I don't know what's going on with that.
And it could be that you might not have answered all of the required questions. Oh, it's grayed out on grants.gov or grant. Okay.
Grants.gov.
Yeah. So just on that, so what we are asking is that you apply through IHCDA so that we can submit a what is it called, a consolidated project application. So all of you would be included with our submission through our standing as the collaborative applicant. There is an ability to apply on your own. There are some downfalls to that. One, another organization would not get a planning grant, which is allows for staffing and things like that from the backbone organization, as well as individualized technical assistance that you would get through our staff. What you see on grants.gov is it is not available yet. And we don't anticipate it being available for at least another couple of days.
And it's on eSnaps. Did you say that?
Yeah, it is in
Okay.
eSnaps, which is it is not a grants.gov application. If you're familiar with applying for funding through grants.gov, it is it's a separate system. That's another benefit for applying through IHCDA in this consolidated project application is we would do all that work for you.
Do we have any more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to receiving your project applications. Like Araceli said, we will be having youth and young adults with lived experience and board members and IHCDA staff review the applications and score them. Araceli and I will not be involved in the scoring because we are probably biased and not biased in a positive way. But we are trusting others to score the application, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Please note that there is an invitation for office hours, 3 o'clock next Wednesday. And we will be there to answer your questions then. Thank you so much, Kristen and Araceli, for putting this together, and I think we're going to end the meeting. Take care, everyone.